Hey, this is Aaron Price, the CEO of Tech United New Jersey. Really excited to have one of our first guests of 2021. Very timely to bring on Amal Sarva. He's the co-founder and CEO of Knotel. You may have met him in some of his other amazing entrepreneurial endeavors. On the last, he's the founder of the Virgin Mobile, created the Peak device, invented a brain-computer interface with his company, Halo Neuroscience, developed a collaborative platform, Note, and founded Knotel, the flexible office platform that's changing the future of work. Amal, thank you so much for being here. Appreciate you joining us. How's it going?
Thank you for having me, Aaron. It's nice to be together. It's been quite a while since we've been
It has been
face-to-face
quite
in
a
any
while.
form.
Which is a bummer, but it's nice to see you virtually. I'm in Hoboken, New Jersey. Where are you geographically set up right now?
I'm in Long Island City, which is in Queens, just across from the UN building.
Which is notable because that's sort of another Hoboken, right? Like Long Island City gets a little, flack. Or do you find yourself defending Long Island City, saying like, no, there's actually some amazing things here? Because I do that all the time in Hoboken.
Yeah, I mean, you have the extra kind of New Yorker, New Jersey kind of jam to deal with. But I guess I've been in Long Island City for many, many years, and over time, it has changed, I guess, from what is Long Island City? Like, is it, excuse me, sorry, is it somewhere in Long Island, which in a certain kind of geographical way is sort of true, I guess, because it's on that kind of landmass. So from cluelessness to like, oh yeah, I've heard of it. There's a bunch of tall towers there. But yeah, I mean, it certainly lacks for all the lore and culture that Hoboken, well, I don't know, has and had. I mean, I noticed this last year Maxwell's closed down. That was kind of sad.
That is a bummer. That is a big bummer. But other good and interesting things are popping up. I see a bunch of you, if you're watching this across any of the social media platforms, are leaving comments. If you have questions as we go, drop them in the comments and we'll pull in relevant questions. So first, explain to people who are unaware, what is Knotel?
Knotel's a flexible workplace platform that we started about 5 years ago. So we run workplaces for companies, for enterprises. So they'll say, oh, we need an office for 100 people in New York or Paris or London, and we'll make it happen for them. We run a big portfolio of spaces, many hundreds of spaces, really all around the world, from Japan to Germany. And we serve big companies who are trying to put a few hundred people, like a division, a regional HQ somewhere, but they want to do it flexibly with a partner who helps make it all happen. They don't have to like hire a million different contractors on their own, and they can make changes when they need to make changes. And this last year, man, was the year of change for sure in the office business.
So we're gonna dive into that. What do you say I'm assuming for many years it would come up, well, how is that different from a WeWork, or, oh, that's like WeWork, because they had a lot of brand awareness. And I'm curious how you answer that question of how it is. Certainly now I think it's become more obvious, but how you typically answered that question of how Knotel differentiates from a WeWork.
Yeah, I mean, over the years, like a lot of people have been to a professional suites kind of place, like a Regis, and then the last few years, Coworking was a really big thing, and certainly WeWork was the kind of flag bearer for that. And our thought with the company that we built is to do it for just normal office. Like instead of getting teams of 3 or 4 that need to be in a co-working kind of space, we thought, well, what if just like offices themselves were like that? So you're a company, you're Microsoft or Shell or Walmart or something, and you just need an office in New York. Like, what if you could deal with that as easily as you can just say to 2 people, hey, go get a coworking? And so that's what Knotel does. We just do like the enterprise version of workplaces. It has some similarities.
Let's and George, always nice to see you. Welcome back to another show. Explain to people pre-pandemic how the business was doing, and then I want to talk about how the pandemic forced some change and where you think we're headed. But just for some more context for people, how are things going?
Oh yeah, I mean, well, we started about 5 years ago, but at the moment, like a year ago at this time, just before everything started changing, we were one of the 3 biggest companies in the world that do this. There's just WeWork and Regis, and operating in countries all around the world, serving lots of big enterprises. And we had gone from just like 0 to many hundreds of millions in revenue, and just that really tiny amount of time. So it was pretty wild. It was pretty wild. Of course, 2020 was very tough for lots of people in lots of different ways, and certainly was a very tough business environment. I'm happy to dig into it some more.
Yeah, I mean, so what did you see happen in your model, and how did you keep Knotel afloat?
It was I mean, it's like you almost would never even imagine, like you should always imagine lots of scenarios when you start a business around like recessions and market ups and downs and whatever, but like almost inconceivable that you'd have a product that no one could use for 6 months or for a year or something like that. I mean, it was really amazing, and definitely long-term and fundamental change in how things will be consumed in the future. And we just don't know what all those changes are. So those were incredibly difficult things to deal with. I mean, the immediate emergency was just like safety, our people, our customers. Like, there's some company that has a bunch of people. It's their only location in Boston, and it's up to us to make sure that it's being cleaned properly. And then even after they're locking it down, that it's like secure. So it was a very challenging time. I mean, we had to just hang in there. We just had to hang in there. We had to keep serving our customers as well as we could, and then working with landlords to just sort of show them where we're going to get to when we get to the other side of it. I mean, if you imagine yourself in the shoes of a landlord this last year, like your typical property business has some office, but it's got retail, and retail was just decimated. It's got restaurants. These portfolios have hotels in them and stuff, and that was getting massively. I mean, it was a very difficult year for our partners on both sides. And so we just had to be clear and open and just work towards the future. And I think we're almost at the future now. It's very close.
How did you find that the various stakeholders here, the property owners, the tenants, how did you find people came together? Did you see, were people trying to just bail and get out, or kick Knotel out of any of these leases? Or how did you, I'm assuming not, but I'm curious how you found the market to respond.
Definitely like a challenging period for everybody, apart from the business that we were trying to do with them. I mean, our customers, a bunch of them, and really the majority, are very large companies. These like the 2,000 biggest companies in the world. But there's a huge chunk that are medium-sized companies, younger companies, and startups and things. Those guys had a terrible year. The smaller companies were just, very, very challenged by the period. Folks were just running out of money and shutting down, having their own sort of business sector or whatever it was. I mean, it was just insane. And so we saw the effect of that in our business. I mean, small companies have had a lot of adversity, but they also have the luxury of saying, well, we're 15 people, and 5 of us have moved away and 10 of us are stuck working from home for 6 months. We're just going to shut our office, and maybe in a year or two we'll open a new one. I mean, small companies, that's possible. The interesting thing about big companies is they were pretty resolute. I mean, they have more staying power, and bigger companies have done pretty well in general over the last year. And they're all, and like pretty fast, they were just like, yeah, we're going to be coming back to work. We are going to be working in offices. We're going to have to change a lot. And we would like you guys to sit at the table and make sure you're staying in tune with us as we get closer, because we're going to need your help to make those changes. We're going to reconfigure these offices. We might open some in the suburbs. We're going to have to change how many people come in each day. And there'll be more technology probably in these offices, partly for safety, partly for collaboration. There's a lot of change. But we know our people are going to have to work together, and it's not so easy to just close an office where 300 people work and then hope that you'll find a similar suitable one, in a year or two.
So you mentioned maybe go to the suburbs, and I've spoken to you privately about, hey, when are you coming to New Jersey? And I'm curious how you see the suburban market now playing a role in your business in the way that maybe you didn't anticipate, or maybe it accelerated from your earlier predictions.
Yeah, the the city center kind of markets, and Hoboken, I would just say, is part of the sort of city center for that part. It's just as you get a little bit
Agreed.
beyond the kind of walking distance into the rest of New Jersey that things change and become suburban. But like the city center world of office was the place where we wanted to focus initially, because that's where all these different companies come, and they're there because their people are there and they all want to work together on stuff and have business meetings and whatever. And that's where a lot of unpredictability and things getting bigger and smaller is, and that's where our flexibility approach really creates value for them. But I guess as they're thinking about the world after COVID, folks are thinking about a lot of different kind of changes, and one of them is the idea of a hub and spoke, where maybe folks are comfortable thinking they won't be in the office 5 days a week. Maybe it's like a couple, but they can't actually be home the other 3-4 days. You need another kind of touchdown spot or some kind of hub. One of the concerns, one of the primary concerns, certainly in our region and around New York, New Jersey, is commute type stuff. Like if I can minimize my commute, I'm really improving safety. So that idea is out there around hub and spoke. I haven't seen a big company pull the trigger on it yet, but I have seen some big enterprises that we're talking to start studies on it and start doing research. And it's around the biggest cities in the world. So it's like London, certainly, and then New York and Paris and some of those regions where they used to think, okay, I want to be like right in top of the center of the city with the hundreds of thousands of square feet. And now they're like, that's probably just like a showroom kind of place where people do meetings. But I can't just tell all my people the rest of the time you have to work from home. It's just not acceptable to most people. A lot of people like it, but there's a lot of people who just find it insane. Like they just can't get anything done.
I mean, for those who are or who follow us with the New Jersey component, I think a great example of this, Google has 8,000 employees headquartered traditionally in New York City. Approximately 2,000 of those employees live in New Jersey. I'm advocating for basically Google now has a pop-up New Jersey headquarters. How can we retain that talent here and leverage the reality of this complementary relationship that we already have as a region with New York and New Jersey, as opposed to some silly rivalry? And I think that's exactly the space that Knotel is hoping to sit into. Isn't that right?
Yeah. So I mean, for someone like that, they might say, "Yeah, we want to try it out. We want to have somebody do the whole thing for us. We can't like go touring a bunch of sites and then design and build and then like maybe Knotel, hey, what have you got? Have you got something in northern New Jersey where we can put a few hundred people and they'll have the option to go in there, turnkey, we do it for them. And then over time, if they get more conviction on it, maybe they want to have more sites or they want to expand that site. That's the kind of thing we would do for them. And office, while office is an important cost for companies, the people are actually the hugely valuable resource. Like you spend 10 times as much on your people as you do on the real estate. And it would make sense to offer them more and different options. And in the Bay Area is a place where we've seen that, right? I mean, it'd be interesting to see how the New York region develops. But in the Bay Area, like Google, yeah, they've got the Mountain View thing, but they've got San Francisco, there's like Oakland, there's all these other touchdowns, right? It's a bit strange that they haven't pursued that a bit further in this region.
What do because you're working with some larger companies and company culture playing such a big factor in the office, the tech community generally has been flexible, has been remote enabled, certainly I think is part of the culture generally of the tech community. Are you seeing some of these larger companies express interest and desirability about hub and spoke, flexible workplaces? Do you think that they're going to eventually adapt that kind of this is for the long term?
We're still in the early innings because people haven't made big commitments yet, but I see them considering every kind of possibility. Like you have all kinds of spectra along which people are organized. There's the ones who are like, we need everyone back in the central HQ ASAP. There's others who are like, we would love to be as remote as possible over time. We want a lot more offices fragmented all over the place. We want to open an office in some small city. Like we're going to start shifting to Nashville away from Chicago. Everything's on the table. Like people are clearly thinking about these things because a lot of them make sense in different ways. I've got us set up to be a partner who will help them land it, whichever the way they pull the trigger. But I am more uncertain now about which is like the answer than I was 6 months ago, because I think in the very first period last summer, folks were just like, oh, well, it's all work from home. It's fine. I like work from home. Then people got fed up and then they started searching for every other option, and then people have now articulated quite a few different ways to go, but they haven't made big money investments as far as I can tell.
It also seems like, humans miss other humans. So there's going to be some need to interact with people just on a human level at some point soon.
Oh, definitely. Yeah, definitely.
We've got a great question from Timothy Graham, who said along these lines: do you see companies shrinking office size in the future? Now that we can see that people work from home and still maintain a company, is there a need for large office places in the future? In line with the line of question we're talking about here, how do you see these leases changing? How do you see the office structure changing as things go back to as things that we could safely open back up?
Yeah, I mean, for a long time already, Office has been changing to be a more collaboration-centric kind of space, right? I mean, people complain about the open office, but the open office basically shrunk your desk, didn't give you a private office because it's like you're not actually doing that much work in the office anymore. The percentage had gone down, and it put a much bigger emphasis on talking to people in real life and that kind of collaboration. It won't look quite the same as that level of density as we get back in, because maybe health and safety type concerns, we're going to always try to have a little more spacing, at least for a while. Um, it probably makes sense to think that you need less space because you have fewer people in the office. Totally makes sense. But then if you say, oh, but we need more space between people, at the moment it feels like it kind of nets out. I think there's a shortish period where certainly everyone's thinking about reducing space, and that's just because we have a terrible recession going on right now. I think that's like the biggest reason. Once folks are like really working, I think that cost imperative will be a little less intense.
Yeah, I want to point out, having been in some of the Knotel spaces, I'm sure you customize them for the client. The spaces I've been in are very beautiful, very interesting to work in, inspiring places to be. How do you see the design, the function of the space, besides just potentially okay, we got to position people with enough space between us? How do you see the design of offices evolving over the next
Yeah.
5 to 10 years?
Yeah, I mean, that's always like a central part of why companies choose us. Like they don't realize it, I guess, when they first contact us. They're just like, oh yeah, I need some kind of flexible options. But really early in the conversation, we're like, all right, well, what are you going to be doing here and how are we going to do it? And we have workplace strategists and designers and architects who are part of our team that help you make good choices instead of like a gigantic boardroom that never gets used, like all these classic mistakes that people make. So we help you make better choices. And a lot of that is about functionality. Like, what are you going to be doing together? The sizes of the different rooms and the technology you need in those rooms, and how do you make sure people are bumping into each other. So yeah, I mean, what's different is a lot more collaboration. When you're in the office, you're going to expect to see people. You're not going to walk in the office and then get directly on the phone and a bunch of videos. You don't want to do that. But that said, like an in-person meeting back in the day, just a couple of years ago, the average day companies would have around 80% utilization, which means 20% of the office people weren't there. They were doing something somewhere else. And that number, 80%, well, that's going to go down. So maybe in the average day in the near future, it's like 50% of people are in the office, something like that. But that means for your typical meeting, like, your team meeting, your Tuesday morning meeting, maybe half the folks are on remote. And you got to assume that while you're in to have that meeting, you need much better video and much better like technology in the workplace to assume that it's hybrid, like it's always hybrid. That's a little bit of this trendy term of like in person plus virtual altogether.
Yeah. Do you see Knotel or did you already invest in connected conference rooms, connected desk spaces, like to do things like this? Do you see that now as a place where you'll have to increase investment?
I think so. Yeah. I mean, the mix of what we put in our spaces. Yeah. I mean, like the really big push for the last couple of years was we were redesigning the way we did our whole build out. And so we had this whole sort of proprietary modular system. So you could have a conference room or a meeting room or some wall or something, but it was modular and movable and flexible. So you're like, oh, we just hired a whole bunch of salespeople. It's getting really noisy in here. We need to change it. Without doing demolition and construction, we'd be able to reconfigure the space to actually make it work for you again. And I think this next wave is another prompt of redesign for that. It's like, oh, well, more technology, more little phone booths because you're on more video sometimes, and then more immersive collaborative spaces, and definitely some places to bump into people.
Is there, we have strong ties to the New Jersey government. Government's played an interesting role in general in the last year, not just the politics of it, but with some of I'm thinking specifically of the funding opportunities to try to retain businesses, keep them afloat. As you think about expansion into markets like in New Jersey, what would you charge the state governments with in thinking about to make sure it's a welcoming environment, and in the short term helps you take the kind of risk safely to expand into a market like New Jersey, and knowing there might be some additional government support?
Wow, how fascinating! I don't usually get asked like, how can the government help us? Um,
I'm not promising anything, but I do get asked the question from time to time.
Yeah, it's a reasonable question. I mean, I guess our our business works to try to increase the fluidity and flexibility of the office market for companies, and all the kind of norms that exist in each geography one by one that are all sort of weird and make it hard for companies to do stuff. Those are the things where a lot of friction comes from for the durations of leases and all the capital investments you have to make and things like that. And so the spirit of what we do is to try to encapsulate a lot of that complexity and make it more fluid. And so I guess, you often hear that from policy folks, that that's one of their goals, to make it sort of easier to do business. But that really is, I mean, that really is a thing that matters a lot. To be a place where it's easy to do business is hugely important.
Yeah.
Real estate is famously not easy,
Yeah, expensive and painful. We're going to wrap up shortly, but I don't want to ignore that we're on the heels of a new president in office. You and I have been together at some political events, and I wonder how you think that, well, in general, how do you feel that the new president in office helps the business environment, and in particular in this space, how do you think that this new administration might affect the future of work?
Yeah, well, I'm thrilled. I'm thrilled that we finally got here. Usually, in political campaigns, it's sort of vague things that people promise, like, oh, ease of doing business, But this last year was like the most tangible I've ever seen, where the presidential administration had such a clear and harmful effect on our ability to do stuff. Just the management of the virus in America, but also just the design of the different programs that got deployed to try to help business in the U.S. Because we operate in like France and the U.K., Germany. We got to compare what was going on economically speaking. The types of policy approaches that those folks used in the different European countries made it just so much easier to keep on going in those geographies. Like, our business is up a little bit compared to pre-pandemic in Europe. And in the US, it's been super tough, and we've given up a lot of revenue. And I can just see so clearly, like, same virus, same disaster, different government, different policy, and you just see like such a different result. A lot is at stake in these kinds of things, and I am very optimistic about what we can look forward to.
Did you ever find yourself considering leaving the U.S. market entirely?
Because it was so tough this last year, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it's still a big and powerful. I mean, this is still a hugely valuable market for anyone to do business in, and it's a great place to be. But yeah, this last year was really tough. It was really tough. But I have high hopes for what comes ahead. I mean, a very resilient market, even if it's somewhat dynamic in scary ways.
You've been involved in really a variety of pretty incredible businesses, and I hope that we can have you back another time to talk about some more of the entrepreneurial background here and lessons learned. But if you were to predict, if someone were to write a book about you that maybe someone would read in 100 years, what would you like to be in there?
That is like an invitation to some kind of nonsense answer for me. I just like making new stuff that helps people, and it would be like an insane honor if someone was bothering to talk about me in 100 years. So maybe
it lives on in Wikipedia, but in general, I'm particularly interested because you have a unique background of a philosophy degree in tech, and especially now where there's a whole idea of big tech is under fire. I wonder what you do. What's your view on that? Do you think that Facebook should be broken up? Do you think that big tech is too greedy?
I guess I certainly find myself agreeing and disagreeing with some of the stuff that the big players do. Like, I think Facebook is pretty evil in almost all the ways I can think about it. About breaking up giant companies, I mean, I don't know if you have to agree or disagree with them. I guess over time that has made sense in different industries, right? But it does seem scary to me. So I guess I don't have like a super strong point of view. I can understand a lot of power comes with a lot of wealth, but on the other side, like, I don't know, do we want to be interfering? They seem better run than our government did the last few years, so it's like hard to be sure.
So then let me flip the question around. Our motto at Tech United is to empower entrepreneurs and innovators to build a better future for all. And so what reminder would you give, especially to the early stage entrepreneurs and the early stage companies, about how to make sure that they're doing the right thing and that they chart the right course as their businesses grow?
That's so interesting because, like, really early in the life of a business, it's like you always face this existential risk. Like, you're not in business. Every morning you wake up and you're out of business until you save the day that day. Um, and it may feel hard to just like think about doing the right thing as opposed to just surviving. And I don't know. I mean, I guess we have the benefit of living in a time where there are so many problems to solve, and you can start your company where the entire point of the company is to make some problem better. If you start with that kind of fundamental purpose, uh, maybe that helps more than some kind of rule book for your daily living.
Pick a notable problem to solve. I don't know if you can tell, but I have a large dog barking in the background, which is probably our call to end the show. But I really, really appreciate you being with us. Normally, if we were in person, we do the stand up, high five your neighbor. This time, I'm going to go to my left, which is to your right. So on the count of three, high five to the right.
I'm
One,
gonna go
two,
this way.
three, boom. There
Did
we
that work?
go. It mostly worked. You like that, Jasmine? We're mixing it up. Usually we do the webcam, but it's 2021. We got to shake it up a little bit. Where can people? We've got the scrolling banner. People can learn more at Knotel, Knotel.com. Where else can they follow you on any social or other places where you're sharing wisdom?
Yeah, well, I'm on LinkedIn and on Twitter. I'm all AMOL.
Awesome. Thank you so much for being with us. I really appreciate it. I wish you the very best of luck this year, and hopefully things turn around in a much different direction.
Yeah, I hope for all of us. Thank you.